I honestly feel really bad about doing this because the timing, it's terrible because it was just Luffy's birthday and I'm grateful for him as a character. He's one of my favorite MCs, and shout out to Oda for writing such an amazing and inspiring character. But I wanted to address something today because over the past month or so, and I guess you could say ever since we finished Wano, Luffy became an emperor and we got to Egghead, and more specifically Luffy fighting against Lucci, Kizaru, and the 5 elders. I think a lot of people have talked about Luffy and his Gear 5th in such a positive light, which I get because it's such a cool and important power up. But at the same time, because of the recency bias, how new the awakening is, and Luffy's rapid growth, I think that we kind of blindly look at his gear, look at his new awakening, and I think that because of him being the MC and having such a broken ability that we forget how strong a lot of other characters in this series are, and also what Luffy has left to achieve, and I wanted to talk about that today. But if you guys enjoy regular anime content, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you guys never miss out on a new video. And let's talk about why Luffy's not the strongest. Well, at least not just yet. I already mentioned a little bit on how Luffy's Gear 5th is really broken, and I think you can argue it's the strongest power in the series. It's essentially Toon Force, and he can do anything that he imagines. Some include his muscle technique, where he essentially becomes Popeye and he turns really strong. He can grab lightning and turn into a giant. He affects the properties around him, turning them into rubber like the ground or the pipe, allowing him to slingshot himself. He can create things like he did with goggles and also turning a tree into a baseball bat, and there are plenty more that he has displayed, but that's just a few of it. And those are just some of many that he's displayed. Luffy, he's really broken. Now, is it the most broken Devil Fruit in this series? I'm gonna say yeah, but I think it kind of depends. I think there's a few Devil Fruits that you can make a legitimate argument for. Law's Devil Fruit is essentially an operator room, and he can even use other Devil Fruit powers within that fruit. Akainu's Magu Magu is the highest offensive Devil Fruit in the series. Blackbeard's Yami Yami can negate other Devil Fruit abilities, and obviously those are just the abridged versions, but I still think they have some arguments to be as broken as Luffy's, especially Blackbeard, because if he can negate the effects of Devil Fruits, well then Luffy's Toon Force or his Gear 5th, well, it essentially becomes useless. But that's a topic for another day. I made a short, I think it was last week, where I talked about the amount of times that Luffy has used Gear 5th since arriving at Egghead. That number is 3, and technically 4 if you count that one instance of him having a rage moment about the holographic food, but I'm not really counting that. The 3 real times included against Rob Lucci, which lasted 2 chapters, Kizaru, which lasted 3 chapters, and Saturn, Kizaru, and the remaining Gorosei, which lasted about 7 chapters. I want to go into details about each of the times he used this awakening, and you'll understand why as the video goes on. But before I do that, I think it's imperative to mention that Luffy, he still has room to grow and he still has room to improve not only his Devil Fruit but his Haki as well, which I'll address a little bit later. Because you can even look at his fight against Kaido. Once he unlocked Gear 5th, the fight ended just a few episodes later. Now that's because both of them were exhausted and at their wits end, but Luffy's Gear 5th doesn't last as long as you really think it does. Against Kaido, Luffy went out of his Gear 5th the very next episode that he achieved it. Granted, he got it back, but that was only for a few more episodes, which is similar to what's happened in Egghead against Lucci. I don't think anyone believed Lucci was on Luffy's level. I think that Oda and the anime wanted to showcase that Lucci had gotten stronger, and they showed us what he can do, but at no point when Luffy and Lucci were fighting did we ever believe that Luffy was outmatched or going to lose, but still, only after 2 episodes, he was out of his Gear 5th. Same with Luffy and Kizaru. I generally don't understand why people act like Luffy and Kizaru, their first interaction didn't end in a draw. Looking at the start of the fight, it was clear that Gear 4 Snake Man was not enough for Kizaru, as we saw how Kizaru kicked Luffy into the barrier, which caused Luffy to transform into Gear 5th. And I've seen so so many people talk about how the barrier caused damage and it wasn't Kizaru, which is fair, but it was because Kizaru gained an opening during the fight and the kick caused him to go into the barrier. So without Kizaru kicking Luffy here, then he wouldn't have flown into the barrier. When Luffy used his Gear 5th, you could argue that both of the two had clear objectives that was bigger than fighting Kizaru. He was trying to kill Vegapunk and Luffy was trying to prevent that and also stop Kizaru from hurting his friend. You could technically argue that Luffy, he won in that aspect because in that specific interaction from chapter 1091 to chapter 1095, Vegapunk, he was not killed and Kizaru failed. However, the fight ended with both of them unable to move and Kizaru was the first one of the two to get up and start fighting again. And yes, I understand that Luffy, he didn't land that many attacks on Kizaru for him to go down as quickly as he did, but also Kizaru forced Luffy to fight in his Gear 5th. So regardless of why Luffy was on the ground, whether it's him just being exhausted after being in that form, the fact of the matter is Kizaru forced him to fight to that extreme. Once again, with his most recent use of Gear 5th, Luffy, he used it in order to stop Kizaru and Saturn. He sent them flying, and for Kizaru, I do want to mention that he's tired of fighting, especially after he killed his friend, but he's perfectly capable of coming back and fighting once again. Luffy's also using Gear 5th against the other Gorosei like Warcry and Jupiter. However, the difference between the Gorosei and other characters is that they're immortal. So Luffy may have the advantage on them at the moment, but since they're immortal, it's a battle of endurance, which is something Luffy would lose in because currently Luffy is exhausted and even after eating that Harkle, he doesn't have enough energy and strength to use Gear 5th. So even though the form is very powerful, one glaring weakness is that Luffy, he is unable to stay in it very long because 3 times during this arc, he was in it for 2 chapters against Lucci, 3 against Kizaru, and 7 against the Gorosei. And maybe this is Oda's intention because the ability, it is so strong, he doesn't want to allow Luffy to just be overly broken and busted for the rest of the series. At the same time, Luffy also has to get better with his haki control. He has a decent grasp of Ryo and Future Sight, but not Advanced Conqueror. Is he on the same level in terms of haki compared to Shanks? I think we can all answer that. The answer is no. So until he gets that proficient with all haki and all the advanced versions, Luffy, he is not the strongest just yet. I am a firm believer that Wano was an arc to showcase that Luffy going against Kaido, going against an emperor, was to showcase that he entered the upper echelon of strength, and I think it would take someone minimum of an admiral to have a chance in order to beat him. So right now, only top tier characters like the Admirals, the Yonko, the Gorosei, and potentially the God Knights, they are the ones who compete against Luffy. But once he learns better haki control, and if he can utilize his awakening more as the story progresses, because there's still a few arcs left for Luffy to improve, that's when we'll see Luffy being the strongest in the series. But let me know how you guys feel about this in the comment section below. I know I'm going to anger a lot of Luffy fans, but I'm all here for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you guys never saw a new video. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. It's on the screen and in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to unleash your potential.